My name is Claire, and I was 32 years old the Mother's Day my own mother-in-law stood up at brunch and called my ex-husband's new wife the real mother of my children. She said it in front of everyone, my daughters, his parents, the waitstaff, the whole room. She didn't stumble. She didn't whisper. She said it like she'd been waiting months to finally speak the truth out loud. My youngest was holding my hand, and the only thing I could do was not cry. Not yet. That moment didn't come from nowhere. It was the final scene in a story my mother-in-law had been writing for years, ever since my ex-husband remarried a woman she approved of more than she'd ever approved of me. I'm not here to tell you I was a perfect wife. I'm here to tell you what it's like to lose your children not in a courtroom, but in slow, public increments. One invitation you're not included in. One birthday party you hear about after. One Mother's Day when the woman who raised your replacement stands up and declares the replacement the real mother. And you have to sit there with your napkin in your lap and your daughter's fingers wrapped around yours and pretend you're fine. Why does a grandmother do this? What does she get out of it? And what happens to a biological mother who finally stops pretending? I married Daniel when I was 25, young enough to believe love could bridge any distance, naive enough to think his mother would eventually warm up to me. She never did. From the first dinner at their house in Connecticut, I could feel her measuring me against a standard I hadn't been told about. The way she looked at my hands when I held my fork, the pause before she answered my questions. The way she would say Daniel's ex-girlfriend's name just a little too often, just a little too warmly, like she was keeping a backup file. We had 2 daughters, Ella born when I was 27, Sophie 2 years later, and for a while I believed being their mother would finally give me a place in that family. It didn't. What it gave me was a new way to be found insufficient. My mother-in-law, Patricia, loved the girls, no question, but she loved them in a way that seemed to treat me as an obstacle rather than a source. She would tell me how Sophie had Daniel's nose, Ella had his stubbornness. She rarely mentioned anything they got from me. When I corrected her gently once, she smiled the way people smile when they believe you're being petty and said, "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it." That was her signature move, saying things that cut exactly where she intended, then acting confused when you reacted. Research from family therapists calls this covert aggression, but at the time I didn't have a name for it. I just knew that every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner left me feeling smaller. Daniel didn't see it, or he chose not to. When I brought it up, he would say, "That's just how she is, she doesn't mean it." And I would swallow my frustration, because what was I supposed to do with that? The divorce came 4 years ago. The reasons were ordinary and exhausting. We grew apart. He worked late, I resented him. He resented my resentment. We tried counseling, but you can't counsel 2 people who no longer want to fight for the same thing. The split was civil enough on paper. Joint custody, shared holidays. The house was sold, and we each found apartments 20 minutes apart so the girls could stay in the same school district. I thought that was the hardest part. I was wrong. Daniel started dating Angela within 6 months. I found out from Sophie, who came home from a weekend with their dad and said, "Daddy has a friend named Angela who makes pancakes with smiley faces." I smiled and said that sounded nice. Inside, I felt something crack, not jealousy over Daniel. That was gone. But the idea of another woman making pancakes for my daughters with a face I would never see because I wasn't there. That carved something out of me I didn't know could be carved. Angela was everything I wasn't. She was a preschool teacher, warm in a way that looked effortless, patient in a way I had always had to fake. She had no children of her own but seemed to understand them instinctively. And Patricia adored her. From the first introduction, it was like watching a door swing open that had been locked my entire marriage. Patricia invited Angela to lunch. She posted photos of her and Angela together on social media with captions like, "Grateful for this wonderful woman." She sent her flowers on her birthday. Flowers. In 8 years of marriage, Patricia had never sent me flowers. I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself it was better for the girls if everyone got along. And it was. The girls loved Angela. They came home talking about her baking, her crafts, her gentle way of redirecting them when they argued. I felt grateful and gutted at the same time. I started noticing the pattern. Patricia would plan family events and invite Angela and the girls, but not me, even when the events involved the girls. Mother's Day was the worst. The first year after the divorce, Patricia sent me a text. Short, to the point. "I'm having a Mother's Day brunch for the girls. Angela will be there. If you want to come, you can, but you need to understand that the girls already have plans with their father that day, so this is really about honoring everyone who mothers them. I didn't go. I spent that day alone in my apartment, scrolling through photos of other families, feeling like I was being erased in slow motion. By the second year, the invitations had stopped completely. The girls would come back from Mother's Day weekend with Patricia and Daniel and Angela and talk about the brunch, the flowers, the special gifts Grandma Pat had given them to give Angela. They never mentioned a gift for me. I bought my own flowers that year. I put them in a vase and told myself it didn't matter. But it did, and it was getting worse. Then came the morning of this year's Mother's Day. I had the girls for the morning. We made waffles. They gave me hand-drawn cards. Sophie had written "Best Mom in the World" in purple marker, and it meant everything. Then Patricia called and said she was hosting a brunch at noon at a restaurant downtown. She said the girls should come. She said Angela would be there. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said, "You're welcome too, of course." That tone. The tone that had greeted me at every dinner, every holiday, every event where my presence was tolerated but never wanted. I should have said no. Every instinct told me to stay home, but Sophie asked me to come. She said she wanted me there, and I wanted to be where my children wanted me, so I went. The restaurant was upscale, white tablecloths, crystal water glasses. Patricia had reserved a long table near the window, and when I walked in, they were already seated. Daniel, Angela, Patricia, Daniel's father, Richard, the girls. Everyone had a place setting except me. Sophie saved the seat next to her by putting her hand on it. I sat down. Patricia looked at me and nodded once, the way you acknowledge a guest you didn't invite. The conversation was cordial at first. The girls talked about school. Daniel asked about my work. I tried to stay in the moment, but then came the toasts. Patricia stood up, tapped her glass, and began a speech about family, about love, about the importance of honoring the women who shape our children's lives. She looked at Angela. She talked about how Angela had stepped into this family with grace and patience. She said the girls were lucky to have a mother figure who chose them, who loved them without condition. Then she said the words I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I want to recognize the real mother of these beautiful children. She raised her glass to Angela. The table applauded. My daughters looked at their stepmother, then at me, confusion flickering across their faces. Sophie's hand tightened around mine under the table. I didn't stand up. I didn't scream. I looked at Patricia, and for 1 second I saw her see me. She knew exactly what she had done. The question is why. And the answer, which I learned only later, is worse than I could have imagined. I didn't learn the truth that day. I held it together through the rest of the brunch, through the drive home with the girls, through the long night of staring at the ceiling. Ella asked me on the way if Grandma Pat was mad at her. I said, "No, honey, Grandma Pat loves you. She just said something that hurt Mommy's feelings." Sophie didn't ask anything. She just held my hand. The next week passed in a fog. I dropped the girls at school, went to work, came home, ate nothing. I replayed the brunch in my head 100 times. The toast, the applause. The moment when Patricia looked at me over her raised glass and I saw not a mistake but a statement. She knew what she was saying. She wanted it recorded. I called a therapist I'd seen once after the divorce. I told her what happened. She said, "What you're describing is a form of maternal gatekeeping by a grandparent. It's a pattern where extended family members attempt to replace the biological mother's role, often to maintain control or access to the grandchildren. Patricia may be afraid of losing her connection to the girls, so she's trying to solidify Angela's position as primary mother figure." I asked, why would she be afraid of losing them? I've never tried to keep her away. The therapist paused. Because sometimes the grandmother's fear isn't about what you've done, it's about what she herself has experienced. That sentence stayed with me. I started asking questions. I called Daniel's father, Richard, who had always been quiet but never unkind. He was the only one I trusted to tell me the truth. We met for coffee at a diner near his office, and the moment I sat down, he looked at me differently. Not guilty, not defensive, old. He said, "You deserve to know." Then he told me something Patricia had never spoken aloud in 30 years. Her own mother died when she was 8. Her father remarried within a year. The stepmother, a woman named Gloria, had been cold and controlling. She favored her own children over Patricia and her brother. But worse, Patricia's father had let it happen. He had allowed Gloria to gradually erase the first wife's memory. Photos disappeared. Stories stopped being told. By the time Patricia was 12, she was being introduced as Gloria's daughter, and the woman who gave birth to her was never mentioned. Patricia grew up believing she had been replaced, that her real mother had been erased, and that no one had stopped it. Richard said she never dealt with it, she carried it like a scar she refused to show. And when Daniel got divorced, something in her broke. She saw you as a woman who abandoned the family, who left her son. But more than that, she saw Angela as a chance to rewrite her own childhood. If she could make Angela the perfect mother, the beloved stepmother, she could finally prove that stepmothers can be loved and accepted. She was trying to fix her own history by using your life. I sat there in the diner, coffee getting cold, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not understanding, something colder. Because if Richard was right, then the entire Mother's Day scene wasn't about me. It was about a 60-year-old wound that Patricia had never healed. But that didn't make it less destructive. I asked Richard, does she know she's doing this? He shook his head. I don't think she sees it. She thinks she's being kind to Angela and protecting the girls. She doesn't see that she's hurting you, and she doesn't see that she's using your daughters the way Gloria used her. I drove home in silence. The realization was heavy. Patricia was not a villain. She was a traumatized child who had grown into a controlling adult and never stopped. But trauma doesn't justify cruelty, and the cruelty was escalating. Later that week, I received a letter in the mail, Patricia's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no greeting, just a list. A list of dates and events she believed I had missed or ruined, things I hadn't attended, times I had complained, instances where the girls had come home upset after being with me. She ended with a line that chilled me. If you truly loved the girls, you would want what is best for them. What is best for them is a united family with Angela as their mother figure. You are only confusing them. I showed the letter to my lawyer. She read it twice, then said, this sounds like she's building a record. She's documenting to establish a case that you are not a fit co-parent. If you ever try to move, change custody arrangements, or limit her access, she could use this to claim that you're causing emotional harm. I asked, can she do that? She said, grandparent visitation rights vary by state. In some states, if a grandparent has an established relationship with the child, they can petition for visitation even if both parents object. And if she can argue that the child's well-being is threatened by the mother's behavior, she might get court-supervised time or even custody modifications. I felt the floor drop. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity, I was fighting for my role as a mother. That weekend, I picked up the girls from Daniel's apartment. They were quiet. Sophie had a drawing in her hand. It was a family portrait. She had drawn Daniel, Angela, Patricia, Richard, herself, and Ella. There was a space next to Ella, a blank figure. I asked her, is that me, honey? She looked down and said, Grandma Pat said you're not in the family picture. Ella said, I tried to put you in, but Sophie said we'd get in trouble. I knelt down and I held them both. I told them they would never get in trouble for loving me, but inside I was crumbling. Patricia was already winning. That was the moment I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't attack Patricia without making things worse for the girls. I couldn't let her keep poisoning their minds. I was trapped. Then 3 days later, I got a call from Angela. She asked to meet me alone, no explanation, just a coffee shop, her treat. I almost said no, but something in her voice made me curious and scared. We met on a Tuesday afternoon. She was early, she was nervous, she didn't order anything. The moment I sat down, she said, I didn't know she was going to do that, and I should have said something. I should have stopped it, I'm sorry. I watched her face. It was not the face of someone gloating. She looked exhausted, genuinely apologetic. She said, I love your daughters, I do, but I have never wanted to replace you. Patricia has been pushing me into that role from the beginning. She told me you weren't involved. She told me you didn't want the girls. She painted a picture of you as this cold, absent mother. And I believed her because she's so convincing. But now I've seen you with them. I've seen how they light up when you arrive. And I realize I've been part of a story that isn't true. She reached across the table. I want to help you. I want to set the record straight with the girls, with Daniel. But Patricia has been manipulating everyone. She even has Daniel convinced that you're the problem. He's afraid of her too. I didn't know if I could trust her, but I believed the pain in her voice was real. And I understood that the real war was not between me and Angela. It was between me and Patricia. And Patricia had been fighting this war for decades. But now I had an unexpected ally, and I had a new question. If Patricia was willing to destroy my relationship with my daughters to save herself from a ghost, what else was she capable of? And what would she do when she found out that Angela had turned against her? Angela kept her word. She met with me twice more over the following week. We talked for hours. She showed me text messages from Patricia, screenshots of Patricia coaching her on what to say to the girls, how to position herself as the primary mother figure, how to gently correct the girls when they mentioned me. Angela said, "I thought she was helping me bond with them. I didn't realize she was trying to erase you." I believed her. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. We made a plan. Angela offered to speak to Daniel to explain what Patricia had been doing to show him the messages. She said, "Daniel loves the girls. He's just been manipulated the same way I was. He'll listen." I wasn't sure, but I agreed to let her try. That was my mistake. 3 days later, I got a call from Daniel. His voice was flat, controlled. He said, "Claire, I need to talk to you about Angela. She came to me with some disturbing things. She claims my mother has been pressuring her to undermine you. But I think there's more going on. I think Angela has been playing you both." I asked what he meant. He said, "She showed me texts from you. She showed me the meetings. She told me you were conspiring to turn the girls against my mother." I felt my chest tight. "Daniel, I never said anything about turning the girls against her. I wanted to protect them from manipulation." He paused. "I don't know who to believe anymore, but my mother says you're trying to isolate the girls. She says you're emotionally unstable. She's worried about their safety." The word unstable hit like a punch. I had been called many things, but never that. I said, "Daniel, she is lying. She's been documenting me for months. The letter she sent me, the toasts at the brunch, the pressure on Angela. Ask Angela, she'll tell you." He said, "Angela already came clean. She told me everything. She said you pressured her to lie about my mother. She said you manipulated her guilt to turn her against the family." I couldn't breathe. Angela had betrayed me. She had played both sides. The coffee shop confession, the text screenshots, the alliance, all of it was a setup. Patricia had used Angela to gather evidence that I was trying to alienate the family. Angela was never on my side. She was Patricia's plant from the start. I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for an hour, then I called Richard. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking, telling him what had happened. He called back 20 minutes later and said, "Claire, I'm so sorry. I didn't know, but you need to understand something. Patricia has been planning this for months. Angela was her idea. She met Angela at a coffee shop before she even started dating Daniel. She vetted her. She chose her. Angela is not a random stepmother. She is Patricia's hand-picked replacement. For you." And my son walked right into it. I asked, "Did you know?" He said, "I suspected, but I couldn't prove it until now. Patricia confessed to me last night. She told me everything. She said, I found the perfect woman for Daniel, and I made sure the girls would never miss their mother. She thinks she's protecting them. She doesn't see the harm." I said, "She's destroying them, and she's using my children as weapons." Richard was quiet. He said, "I'll testify if you need me. I'm done being silent." That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through the letter Patricia had sent me. The dates, the events, the accusations. It was a legal roadmap. She was preparing for court. And now she had Angela's testimony, falsified to make me look like the aggressor. I called my lawyer at 6 in the morning. She said, "We need to act fast. She may file for grandparent visitation or even a custody modification. We need to counter with your own documentation." Every interaction, every time she overstepped, every manipulation. "Do you have witnesses?" I told her Richard would help. She said, "Good, but I need you to prepare. If she goes to court, they will look at what is best for the children. And if she can show that you have been trying to alienate the family, that you have been emotionally reactive, she may succeed in limiting your time." I started keeping a log, every call, every text, every time the girls came home with a new phrase or behavior that seemed coached. I wrote down the drawing of the family portrait without me. I wrote down the Mother's Day toast. I wrote down the letter. I wrote down everything. But even as I documented, I felt the ground shifting. The girls started to change. Sophie became quieter. She stopped asking to stay with me. She said, "Grandma Pat says you're sad a lot. She says I should be careful not to upset you." Ella, the younger one, started saying, "I don't want to choose, Mommy. I love you both." That both was devastating. She had been told that there are two mothers now, and she had to love both equally. That is not a choice a child should have to make. I took them to family therapy. The therapist, Dr. Morrison, specialized in blended family dynamics. After 3 sessions, she asked to meet with me alone. She said, "Your daughters are showing signs of emotional splitting. They are being asked to hold two conflicting realities, that you are the primary mother and that Angela is equally important. That is confusing and damaging for a child." The grandmother is actively enforcing this split by giving Angela a platform and rewarding the girls for loyalty to her. This is a classic case of parental alienation through a grandparent, and it is happening fast. I asked, "What can I do?" She said, "Legally, you can document. Emotionally, you need to give the girls permission to love both of you without feeling like they are betraying anyone. That means you cannot speak negatively about Patricia or Angela in front of them. It is hard, but if you show that you are the stable, safe parent, the courts will notice. And Patricia will eventually overplay her hand. They always do." I followed her advice. I stopped complaining. I stopped reacting. When the girls brought up stories about Grandma Pat's house, I listened without comment. When they said Angela made better cookies, I smiled and said, "She does make good cookies." Inside, I was dying, but I kept the peace. Then the legal letter arrived. Patricia had filed a petition for grandparent visitation rights, citing an established relationship and a concern that I was interfering with the children's bond with their paternal grandmother. She attached her documentation. My letter was not included. She had chosen only the parts that made her look reasonable. My lawyer said, "The court will schedule a hearing. We need to be ready." The hearing was set for 3 weeks later. I spent that time building my case. I had Richard's affidavit. I had Dr. Morrison's notes. I had the Mother's Day photo with the toast captured on someone's phone. I had Angela's text to me, the ones she sent before she betrayed me, including the confession that she had married into a manipulated dynamic. But those texts could be twisted. Angela was now aligned with Patricia. I had to be strategic. The night before the hearing, Sophie called me. She said, "Mommy, Grandma Pat told me that if I tell the judge I want to live with her, you won't be sad anymore." I felt my heart break into pieces. I said, "Honey, you don't have to do that. I am okay. Whatever happens, I am okay." She started crying. She said, "But she said you're crying alone every night. She said I can fix it." I couldn't hold my tears. I said, "You are not responsible for my feelings. Grandma Pat was wrong to say that. I love you and that will never change. You are safe." We talked for a long time. She fell asleep on the phone. I stayed up all night. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with a folder full of truth. But I knew that truth does not always win. Sometimes the story people are willing to believe is stronger. The hearing began. The judge was a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed, patient. Patricia's lawyer presented her case. They showed my letter from months ago, the one I wrote when I was angry. They painted me as unstable, reactive, a mother who couldn't handle the new family structure. They called Angela to the stand. She testified that I had tried to turn the girls against her and Patricia. She said I had been emotionally manipulative. She was good. She had practiced. Then it was my turn. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell the judge everything. But I remembered what Dr. Morrison said, "Stay stable." I took a deep breath. I said, "Your Honor, I have never tried to alienate my daughters from anyone. I have only tried to protect them from being used as emotional pawns. Patricia has a history of trauma. Her own mother was erased by a stepmother. She has projected that onto my family. I have evidence. I have witnesses. I am not the threat." The judge looked at my exhibits. She read Richard's affidavit. She read Dr. Morrison's report. She looked at the Mother's Day photo. She asked Patricia a question. "Ma'am, why did you toast Angela as the real mother in front of the biological mother?" Patricia answered smoothly, "I was trying to honor the stepmother who has stepped into a difficult role. I meant no harm." The judge turned to me. "And what do you say was the harm?" I looked at her. I said, "The harm was telling my daughters in public that their mother is not their real mother. The harm was telling them they cannot put me in a drawing. The harm was telling my 8-year-old that she can fix me by choosing a grandmother. That is not honor. That is replacement." The court was silent. The judge looked at her notes. She looked at Patricia. She said, "I am going to appoint a guardian ad litem for the children. I will suspend the grandparent visitation petition until the gal has interviewed all parties and the children. This case is too sensitive to decide on affidavits and deposition alone. I want to know what the children want." It was not a win, it was a delay, but it was breathing room. As I left the courtroom, Patricia walked past me. She whispered, "You should have stayed away. Now you'll lose them for good." I said nothing. I walked to my car. And I called Richard. I said, "I need the truth about the year she disappeared. You said she was in a facility. What really happened?" He told me. and what he said made every previous revelation feel small. Richard told me that when Patricia was 9, after her mother's death, her father sent her to live with an aunt for 2 years while he settled things with the new wife. The aunt was cold, harsh, and the separation broke something in Patricia. She was diagnosed with a severe attachment disorder. She spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility at age 12. Her father never visited. When she came out, her stepmother Gloria had already erased every trace of her biological mother. Patricia learned to survive by controlling everything and everyone around her. She never got treatment. She never talked about it. She just buried it. And I finally understood. Patricia wasn't just a controlling grandmother. She was a traumatized child who had never been protected, and now she was reliving that trauma on my daughters. She was afraid that I would leave and be erased the way her mother had been. So she was preemptively replacing me with Angela before I could cause that pain. In her mind, she was protecting the girls from the loss she had suffered, but she was causing the very loss she feared. The guardian ad litem, a woman named Margaret Holloway, spent 2 weeks interviewing everyone. She talked to the girls alone 3 times. She talked to Patricia. She talked to me. She talked to Angela. She reviewed my documentation. She read the letter Patricia sent. She saw the Mother's Day photo. She read Richard's affidavit. And when she presented her report to the court, she did not hold back. Your Honor, in 40 years of practice, I have rarely seen a case where a grandparent's behavior so clearly constitutes emotional harm to minor children. Patricia Vance has systematically attempted to replace the biological mother in the children's lives, has coached the stepmother to collude in this effort, has instructed the children to lie to the court, and has demonstrated a pattern of psychological manipulation that aligns with the clinical definition of parental alienation. The children are exhibiting signs of anxiety, confusion, and emotional splitting. I recommend that grandparent visitation be suspended indefinitely. I recommend that the mother retain sole legal custody and that the father submit to family therapy. I recommend that Patricia Vance be prohibited from contacting the children until she has completed a minimum of 1 year of intensive therapy focused on attachment and trauma. Patricia's lawyer tried to object, but the judge was already nodding. The judge said, "I accept the gal's recommendations in full. Patricia Vance, you are ordered to have no contact with the minor children until further court order. You will enroll in a therapeutic program approved by this court within 30 days. If you violate this order, you will face contempt proceedings. This court recognizes that you have experienced significant personal trauma, but that trauma does not excuse the harm you have caused your granddaughters. They are not tools for your healing. This order is for their protection." Patricia sat frozen. Angela was crying. Daniel looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something like shame in his eyes. I felt nothing for him. I felt something for Patricia, but it was not forgiveness. It was the hollow recognition that her wounds had consumed her, and she had tried to feed my daughters to them. The next months were hard. The girls missed their grandmother. They didn't understand why they couldn't see her. I had to explain in age-appropriate language that Grandma Pat had been making choices that hurt the family, and until she got help, it wasn't safe for them to be with her. Sophie cried. Ella asked if it was her fault. I held them both and said it was never, ever their fault, and I meant it. I enrolled them in therapy with Dr. Morrison. Slowly, the confusion started to lift. They stopped talking about having 2 mothers. They started drawing pictures with me in the center again. Ella asked one day, "Mommy, is Angela still my stepmom?" I said, "She's your father's wife, and she will always be a part of your life in some way, but I am your mother. That does not change. Please don't ever worry about choosing. Your heart is big enough for many people." That seemed to comfort her. Angela did not stay in the picture. She filed for divorce from Daniel 3 months after the hearing. She told him she could not live in the shadow of his mother's manipulation. She moved to another state. I never spoke to her again. I do not hate her. I think she was a casualty of Patricia's war, just like the rest of us. But she was also a willing soldier for a time, so I hold both truths. Daniel started therapy. He reached out to me 6 months later. He apologized. He said he had been blind, that he had let his mother control him his entire life, that he was working on it. I accepted his apology, but I did not go back to being his friend. The trust was gone. I needed him to be a good father to the girls, and he had to prove that separately. Richard remained in my life. He saw his granddaughters regularly. He told me Patricia was struggling in therapy. She had been diagnosed with complex PTSD and was only now beginning to address the childhood she had spent 60 years avoiding. He said she had asked about the girls. He said she had cried. He said she had written a letter to me. He asked if I would read it. The letter arrived a week later, Patricia's handwriting but shakier than before. She wrote, "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting them from the pain I carried, but I was only passing it down. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I am sorry, not just for the Mother's Day, for everything, for the years I made you feel unwelcome, for the way I used my son, for the way I hurt those little girls. I loved them too much and in all the wrong ways. I am getting help. I hope one day I can prove I am safe. But if I never see them again, I want you to know that you were right. You were always the mother they needed. I was just too wounded to see it." I put the letter in a drawer. I did not respond. Not because I was cruel, but because I had nothing left to give to her healing. My job was to protect my daughters. Patricia had to do her own work. The final surprising detail came a year later. Richard called me and said Patricia had voluntarily enrolled in a program for grandparents who have experienced estrangement from their grandchildren. She had given a talk at a conference about her mistakes. She had used her real name. She had told her story publicly. The woman who had spent a lifetime controlling the narrative had finally let go of control. I still have not spoken to her directly, I may never, but I have allowed supervised video calls between her and the girls, brief, structured with a therapist present. The girls see a woman who looks older, softer, slower. They do not understand the full story. One day when they are older, I will tell them. But for now, they know that Grandma Pat was sick, and she is getting better, and that is enough. That Mother's Day brunch changed everything, but not in the way Patricia planned. She thought she was cementing Angela's place and erasing mine. Instead, she exposed the fault lines in her own soul. And in doing so, she forced me to stop being the quiet, accommodating woman they had all trained me to be. I stopped shrinking. I stopped apologizing. I started fighting. And when I finally stood up, I was not standing alone. I was standing with my children, with a family therapist, with a guardian ad litem who saw the truth, with a father-in-law who broke his silence, and with a resolve I had never known I possessed. The hook from part 1 was about a woman who was publicly replaced. The truth is, I was never replaceable. I was just temporarily obscured, and now I am visible. Now my children know exactly who their mother is. And they know that no toast, no speech, no court filing, no grandmother's wound can ever change that. I don't tell my story to shame Patricia, though I won't pretend she doesn't carry responsibility. I tell it because she is not alone. There are grandmothers in every city, every family, carrying unhealed wounds they cannot name, and they are passing them down to children who never asked to carry them. I tell it because there are mothers sitting in their apartments right now, scrolling through photos of someone else raising their children, wondering if they are replaceable. You are not. The psychological research is clear. Children who grow up with triangulation, loyalty conflicts, and emotional splitting between adults develop anxiety, trust issues, and fractured self-worth that can last a lifetime. The cost is not just one Mother's Day. It is years of confusion, of learning that love is conditional, that belonging can be revoked. Patricia learned that lesson at 8. She spent 60 years trying to unlearn it by controlling everyone around her. She almost succeeded. But she is in therapy now, and I am here with my daughters rebuilding what almost got broken. The girls are doing better. Sophie drew a new family portrait last month. Everyone was in it. I was in the center. Angela was not there. Grandma Pat was a small figure in the corner, and Sophie said, "That's Grandma Pat, she's getting help." I did not correct her. She was right. The lingering question I want to leave you with is not about Patricia or Angela or Daniel. It is about you. Who in your life has been handed a role they never auditioned for? Who has been quietly erased from a family portrait? And more importantly, are you willing to see that person clearly, even if it means rewriting the story you have told yourself about who belongs and who does not? Because the hardest part of this whole experience was not the court hearing or the letter or the toast. It was the realization that Patricia genuinely believed she was protecting the girls. She loved them. She just loved them destructively. And that is the most painful kind of love to confront. So if you are watching this and you recognize yourself in any part of this story, I want you to know that healing is possible. Boundaries are not cruelty. Walking away is not giving up. And no court order, no grandmother, no stepmother, No public declaration can make you any less of a mother than you already are. If this story resonated with you, share it. People need to know that the quiet wars fought inside families matter, and they leave casualties. Subscribe if you want more stories that go beneath the surface of what we are told about family, belonging, and the invisible bonds that hold us together or tear us apart. Thank you for listening to mine.